Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another video. In this one, I wanted to talk about my workflow, specifically for software development, obviously, when I'm working on a new project or something like that. I've seen a number of people make videos like these, and I figured I would share with you guys how I kind of go about starting a new project and then kind of managing that project and continuing that project, well into the future after I've already started it. Some of this stuff has kind of come from, just my own experience, stuff, the way that I do things at my job that I've liked, other people's experiences that I've kind of incorporated. And I try to kind of point out what's from where, like why I do certain things, because I think that's also valuable and helpful to know. So the first stage is identifying the problem that I'm trying to solve. So this usually starts with a much broader topic, but I still want to leave room for creativity. So for example, for DevGrub, which you can find a link in the description, it's my most recent project that I've been working on. That's why I haven't really been making too many videos. So the problem for DevGrub, it kind of starts with a problem statement. Like you want to kind of boil it down, or at least I like to boil it down into a very concrete statement that identifies the problem I'm trying to solve. So in the case of DevGrub, a college degree, and just to kind of, no, I'll say this. A college degree is becoming less valuable and is already not necessary in order to become a software developer. However, oftentimes people who are self-taught or attend 3 to 4 month boot camps often lack knowledge that is helpful in the software development industry. Now, for side note, I myself am self-taught. So this is something that I can really speak to firsthand experience, that I myself feel as though and know that I lack a lot of information and knowledge and experience for that matter, being someone in the software development industry that is self-taught with this stuff. Now, this describes a very broad problem with education in general. And then from here, I look to kind of expand on that into a problem statement that can really be used to serve as a foundation for an entire project or product in this case. So, for example, to add on more to the problem statement that I just came up with or just shared with you, I further that by saying education is more than just the obtainment of knowledge. It is the never-ending set of experiences which one must be immersed in. So by doing this, I'm really setting the stage by saying, hey, like education is not just, getting more information. It's an experience basically. And so that kind of sets the stage for DevGrub, which is, if you didn't know, a place for people to learn and experience software development, right? That's the whole idea. And it boils down to three things at this point, right? It boils down to courses, so learning things. It boils down to then as well as consuming content, right? So experiencing and consuming, engaging, and then also sharing, so being part of a community. Those are very important things when you're trying to educate yourself for something. Think about, if you went to college, think about your experience there. It is an experience, not just sitting in a classroom. There is a full experience that goes into it. And that's very important in my opinion. So that's what I'm trying to provide in DevGrub. The next thing that we'll do is I like to formulate the requirements of a viable solution. So does there need to be authentication system? Does there need to be, in DevGrub's case, it needs to be able to create courses, not just have people take courses. You need to be able to, post your own information, perhaps. You need to be able to, comment so that you can have like a question and answer type of place, right? So these are important things that are necessary for, and I'm just looking over at my puppy because he is still pretty young. But these are very important things that kind of go into this, right? So some questions you might ask for coming up with the requirements. What must the solution be able to do? And you might want to list all of the features. Actually, I can show you guys the puppy right now. Come here, bud. Come here. Look at the camera, bud. Come here. Okay. This is Harvey. This is my 4.5 month old Cavapoo puppy, which is a mix between a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel and, in his case, a toy poodle. So anyway, sorry about that. So you might want to list all of the features and all of the things that your solution needs to be able to do. Next, you're going to want to prioritize these features because you do as we all do, have a finite time to do things. I mean, it's one thing to say that, you're just going to work on it until it's done, but really you have a finite amount of time because at some point you want it to be released, right? And so you do have a finite amount of time, and you want to know what your priorities are for everything that you're doing in this. Next, you want to look at, are there other solutions that already exist, or do I have to build them all myself? You could look at this in two ways. Number one, you could look at this from, the overall solution perspective. Like, can you accomplish what you're trying to do with someone else's product or service, in which case you don't actually have to build anything. You could then also look at this in terms of the code, right? Are there, if you're using, let's say, Node or JavaScript or something, right? Are there NPM packages that you could use to accomplish various pieces that you're trying to do, or do you have to, build it all yourself, right? Like, that's a big difference, right? Even from the perspective of your cloud or your hosting, right? Like, are there services that will help you do things, or do you have to basically just have like a raw VM machine and really build everything yourself, right? And these are all important things to kind of figure out before you actually start coding, right? And some of these, like, as you get experience, might just be kind of like, like a given, like, for example, right now I use Firebase for a lot of stuff, and I know what Firebase can do, and so I know that I'll be able to use Firebase for one project and I won't be able to use it for another project. So step 2 and step 3 are pretty much part of the research section of the workflow, right? Step 3 is going to be architecting how the system will work. And so this is architecting, the code, but also architecting the infrastructure. So let's say you're going to host it somewhere. So what does that, let's say you're going to use the cloud like GCP or AWS. I personally use GCP. So I might ask myself, like, what services from GCP do I have to use, right? Like, how is that going to work? What am I going to do? How are they going to play in and kind of work with each other, right? What am I going to do there to kind of get that to work, This is also the part where you're going to want to data model this. So likely your application will need to persist some kind of data, most do. And so you're gonna need to figure out what that data looks like. I mean, if you're using a NoSQL solution, it might not really be as important for you to, data model things, although I still recommend it, but it won't kill you if you don't. If you're gonna use SQL, which I think I'm gonna have a SQL course actually soon. If you're going to use SQL, you're going to want to data model this. You're going to want to really spend a lot of time on designing the data model, because that's really going to play a role in how successful and how well built your end result is. Another question you're going to want to ask yourself is, what's this going to cost? If you're doing this at a job, they have their own budget. You'll kind of be working within a team, and so this really won't be up to you, like, solely. But if you're doing this on your own, things can add up pretty quick. So you're going to want to consider that, unless you have all the money in the world. I don't. So if that's you, don't worry. But if that's not you, probably won't be. Then, do some research, figure out what things cost, and really put together a plan of what you could be expecting. I know, for example, GCP is rather affordable, especially if you're just getting started and it's more of a small scale application. And hopefully, by the time it's something big, you'd be making money and wouldn't have to worry as much, or you could afford it at least. But they have really good examples of how much stuff will cost, and they're also pretty affordable. So I definitely recommend checking them out. And maybe I'll have a course or some videos or something on GCP as well, because they're pretty awesome. As a general concept, I think when it comes to architecting and designing things, I would say that things are not, or things should not be considered done until you cannot take away from them anymore. So if they are as simple as they can possibly be, meaning, not too many different pieces trying to work together in terms of, let's say your cloud provider services kind of working together, or in terms of, how many lines of code you have written, then it's done. If you can't take away from it anymore, you can move on, right? But until then, you can always make things better. So step 4 is actually designing the UI, if there is one. Now, this is not my strong suit. I can put something together and it can be usable, but it's not going to be winning any awards. So for this, unfortunately, I myself have to go and get some inspiration from somewhere. Make sure you're not copying anything, but inspiration is never a bad thing, I don't think. So that's for me, and my designs seem to be pretty simple and basic all the time. So that it is what it is, but I'd say it's pretty important, and it can be a lot of fun because it allows you to express your creativity in a different way, which is pretty cool. So some stuff that I do when setting up my project, getting it ready for me to actually start developing or building whatever, is, and again, I try and follow the Agile methodology, right? So I will myself work in 2-week sprints. And I will set up, the first thing is a Jira project. Now, if you didn't know, Jira is actually free to use. I don't know if there's like limited features or not, but I have not come up to a situation where I didn't have the features that I needed in Jira on the free plan. And I think they just limit how many people can work with you in a project or something. But that aside, I'll set up a Jira project, and then I will start to, set that up and then kind of make sprints, put all of my requirements, put them into tickets of to-do list tasks, right? So that I can kind of drag them in. And at this point, you're breaking your feature requirements and also your business requirements into like codable chunks that you can kind of work on, right? And these should be very simple, very to the point, broken down. One requirement might have 10, 20 different tasks or tickets that you have to work on. The next thing I'll do is I will set up all of my documentation places. So again, an Atlassian service, that's what Jira, who makes Jira, they make a product called Confluence that is also free. Actually, I believe most of, if not all of Atlassian services or products are free. So they all kind of are directed at like software teams and companies and businesses and products. So I would go check them out if you haven't already. But I'll set up Confluence, which is a place that you can have all your documentation. And so I'll put my business decisions in there. I will put my architecture decisions and like diagrams and stuff in there, and it kind of explain what I was thinking and why I was doing things. And they've got a lot of great templates that you can use to go and basically, help you out, right? Because it can be very daunting staring at a blank page, wondering what to write as far as your documentation goes. I do want to say, though, that the one thing I don't put in there is technical documentation. The reason is because I find that you'll have a lot of business decision and architecture documentation, and you will also have a lot of technical documentation. And overall, it will become very muddied very quickly if you have just everything in there, right? And so unless you feel comfortable with that, or unless you have a very clear structure from the beginning, I would say keep them separate, because there's also, and keep this in mind, there's also a lot of awesome products out there, or other, not products that you buy, but a lot of other alternatives for documentation. Like, for example, if you're building an API and you want to have like API docs, you could use something like Swagger Docs or JS Docs or something like that, that basically allows you to kind of build your documentation from within your code. Another option would be something like Docusaurus, which actually, if you use React, like the React documentation is Docusaurus. So pretty awesome, right? So I would check that out as well, because they make it really easy to create documentation for your actual code. Whereas not to say Confluence is hard, but just that it's a really easy distinction to make. And so you're really easily able to kind of break them apart, and you're going to be living within your code a lot, so why not have the documentation there as well? The next thing I do is I will set up Git. So I'll do this both locally, a local Git repository for that project, and this is something very important that you should do probably from the very beginning. And then I'll also set up a GitLab project. Now, you can use GitHub, nothing wrong with that, but I use sorry, that wasn't a word. I use GitLab for the reason that I will get into next. But I also want to say, when doing Git, make sure to set up a README and a changelog. These will be extremely important when you're going back and looking at things maybe 3, 6, 12 months down the road, when you haven't worked on this one little piece of code, and you can be able to go back and see in your changelog, oh, this is what I did, this is when something changed in a certain version, and then check the README or whatever it is to see how it works. So that's going to be really, really helpful to you down the road. Now, as far as GitLab goes, why do I use GitLab instead of GitHub, for example? Well, the reason, and I don't know if this is no longer true, but I don't know if GitHub has a CI service. Let me actually look it up. GitHub CI. Okay, so it looks like they have GitHub Actions, I don't know if that's a newer thing or not. I'm pretty sure that it is, but at my work, we use GitLab. I'm a software engineer for a hospital here near where I live, and we use GitLab. So I'm comfortable with it. I know how it works. I know how to set everything up, and so I use GitLab for that reason. I'll use their CI and CD pipelines. They're really amazing. And if you take anything from my workflow, it would be that. Please set up CI and CD. Learn how to use it. I actually will make a video. I'm going to write that down right now because it's so helpful. Things. I will write this. I will make a note of it right now. And if I don't actually have it already, CI CD on GitLab. Okay, I will make a video on it because it's so helpful. And basically what it is, it stands for continuous integration and continuous development. And this essentially gives you the ability to have a lot of stuff that you have to do automated, right? So what is that? Well, first off, there's just a lot of stuff that I don't even use or know about that you can do, and it's pretty awesome. But what you can do, for example, is you can have the testing automated, right? So if you don't want to have to sit there and test everything and make sure that it works, you can have that automated, right? If you want to have the building of whatever it is, like let's say you have a React app, you want to have the build part of it automated, okay, you can do that. And if you want to have the deployment aspect or portion of it automated, okay, you can do that. And basically, you just git push, and it will go through and do all of those things for you. And so you don't have to do any of them yourself. And the reason that's amazing is twofold. And actually, you know what? There might be other reasons, but the reasons that I like it are twofold. One, it makes it so that everything you're doing is done in a consistent environment, right? Because if I'm on my computer here, another computer there, whatever, you might have different environments, and so that makes it so that they're all done in the same place, and everything you know is going to work. The next thing, and this is very important, when it comes time for deploying, not that deploying things are hard, right? If you have any experience using Firebase, you'll know that deploying to Firebase is relatively easy. So is my understanding is that so is Heroku, things like that. So is, if you use Google Cloud, that's also pretty straightforward. But you can still make mistakes. And if you set up a CI and CD pipeline, those mistakes quite simply just won't happen because you will set it up once to do it properly, you'll test it out, and then it'll happen the exact same way every single time. You won't be there. You basically are taking the possibility for human error out of the equation. And it also saves you a lot of time because then you can go and work on other things, right? You don't have to deal with it. So if you take anything from this video, take that CI and CD. I'll make a video on it. I have it on my video list. Don't worry about it. We'll explore that together. The next thing that I do is I make a project on my cloud provider. So I use GCP, which stands for Google Cloud Platform. It's basically the Google version of AWS, if you're more familiar with that. I love it. I also use Firebase, which is a Google product. It's actually built on top of GCP, but I really love it. I use it at work, so that's why I use it at home, because I'm most familiar with that as opposed to the other options that are out there. I really love it. I think it's very affordable. I think it's very capable. I've not come up with something that it hasn't been able to do. So I will also make some videos on that, and I will add them to the list right now. GCP, we'll just call it Exploring GCP. Okay, great. If you want to use AWS or Heroku or whatever it is, no problem, but go and set up your project at that point. And kind of make sure that everything's there. The next thing I'll do is I will set up my project locally. So we talk about setting up our cloud project. That's not the same as setting up our local coding, our file structure and project and knitting everything and all that stuff, right? That's setting up the infrastructure, whereas this setting up the project locally is more so setting up, what the code is where the code is gonna live, right? So then I'll do that. The next thing I'll do is I will actually start coding, right? I've already planned out how things are going to look. I've planned out the environment that things are going to live in. I'll start coding, right? So once everything is set up and everything's talking to each other, I'll start coding. This also includes testing, right? So actually firing it up and using it locally to make sure that it works. And then on top of that, you're also going to maybe create a test suite. So writing some unit tests or end-to-end tests or integration tests, right? Whatever you need to do, create those tests so that you can be basically just more confident that things are going to work. And it'll also get run in your CI pipeline, which is also great too. Another thing that's interesting to note, actually important to note, is if there's something that I come across that I don't know how to do, which happens quite often, I'll kind of take the opportunity to make it like a little R&D slash like self-education kind of moment, I guess, if you will, where I'll kind of maybe go in a little offshoot of just learning how something works or how to do something before then integrating it into my actual application. After the code, I will go and actually do more testing. So this is where I would deploy it using the CI and CD pipeline that we talked about earlier. I'll deploy it to a staging environment, which is a hosted environment in your cloud provider that is publicly accessible, but maybe it's a different URL that you're not telling people. Of course, this is, if you're making a web app, it would be at a different URL or an API or something like that. But it's hosted, but it's just somewhere that maybe people don't really know about it so that you can kind of use it independently of other people being able to use it, right? And you'll just want to make sure that everything works. You'll want to make sure that everything works in that environment. And the idea is that the staging environment should, as close to 100% as possible, mirror your production environment, right? That way you know, or you have at least a high level of confidence that when you go and move it or switch it from staging to production, it'll work. I mentioned before that I do sprints, and so the last step that we have here is the deploying it to production step. And what I do is I pick a day out of my sprint. For me, I'll do that on the last day, which would be Saturday, so every other Saturday. And that's when I deploy what I've been working on, assuming it's done, to production, okay? And the reason I do this every single sprint is so that nothing is ever too far behind in terms of versions, which can really create a lot of headache when you're trying to bring things together and merge things and make everything up to date. What I'll do is on Saturday, and the reason I do Saturday is at the end of the sprint, so in theory, everything should be done by then. And I do it on Saturday because during the week I work. So on Saturday, I have that full day to kind of make sure that everything works, make sure that it all kind of comes together properly. And then I also have Sunday, in case there are any really big problems, I can fix things basically Sunday. So basically the weekend I'm able to fix anything that comes up or not fix things that come up. And I just have a lot of time to be working and dedicating myself to the project that I'm working on. After that, I will go and analyze the use, analyze the changes, use it myself. Or assuming that it's already in production and people are already using it, I'll just kind of go and monitor things and make sure that it's all working. And then I will make tickets in Jira for either any bugs that have come up, or I'll go and basically create my next sprint, which basically I'll take tickets that are from my backlog, I'll go and put them up into this sprint. So whether that's new features I'm working on, bugs that I just haven't gotten to yet, or issues that I see that come up from the new features or new changes that I may have made in whatever had just been merged in the sprint before. I hope you guys like watching that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys got something from it. Let me know down in the comments below if your workflow is kind of similar, or if it's different, or if there's anything you think that I'm missing or maybe should check out that might help me. Definitely let me know in the comments below. If you guys wouldn't mind also, I have a link to a survey for my channel. Trying to get better, trying to make better content for you guys. So if you would go and fill that out, I'd really greatly appreciate it. And I think it would help you guys out as well. Other than that, check out DevGrub. It actually is now kind of live in production, sort of like a beta state. So I'm going to have a written article for all of my videos from now on. So definitely go and check that out. And I will see you all in the next video. Take care. Peace.